All right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Big thanks to Sheba Coffee and Tea Co. for making this deep dive possible. Today, we're tackling something that always seems to spark debate: tariffs.
Yep, those little economic tools that can have some pretty big consequences.
Right. And to really understand them, we're going back in time, all the way to 2025.
Ooh, time travel.
Kind of.
Uh,
We've got a White House fact sheet from February 1st, 2025. Plus, we're pulling from our good friend Wikipedia for some historical perspective on tariffs.
Sounds like a solid plan.
So this 2025 fact sheet really caught my eye.
Uh,
It announces some pretty significant tariffs, 25% on goods coming from Canada and Mexico, and 10% on goods from China.
Whoa, starting the year off with a bang.
That's one way to put it. And the reason behind these tariffs? National security.
National security and tariffs, how are those connected?
Well, the document ties these tariffs to concerns about illegal immigration and drug trafficking.
Yeah.
Yeah, specifically fentanyl. They're arguing that these countries aren't doing enough to tackle these issues, and these tariffs are a way to hold them accountable.
So using tariffs as a kind of pressure tactic.
It seems that way. And the language in the fact sheet is pretty strong, too. Words like emergency situation, intolerable alliance, even invasion of our country.
Wow, they're not mincing words.
Definitely not.
No.
It paints a very serious picture. But it makes you wonder, is it really all about national security?
I mean, it definitely grabs your attention, but you have to wonder what else is going on.
Right. And to add another layer to this, the fact sheet also points to President Trump's history of using tariffs to protect American industries.
So are we talking national security, economic strategy, protectionism, or maybe a bit of everything?
Exactly. It's a tangled web, for sure. The fact sheet does try to build an economic case, suggesting that the U.S. is less reliant on trade than Canada, Mexico, and China.
So implying that the U.S. has more leverage to use tariffs as a pressure tactic.
That's the implication. But to really understand the potential impact of these tariffs, we need to step back and look at the history of tariffs. What have we learned from past attempts to use them?
All right, let's dust off the history books.
Perfect. So, our second source, Wikipedia's entry on tariffs, gives us a broad overview. And history shows us that tariffs have been used for various reasons. Sometimes they seem to work, sometimes not so much.
It's a mixed bag, right?
Totally. Take Great Britain, for example. They used protectionist policies, including tariffs, while they were becoming a global industrial powerhouse back in the 18th and 19th centuries.
Right, using tariffs to shield their industries from competition and help them grow.
Exactly. But there's debate about whether those tariffs actually contributed to their success or whether it happened despite them.
So the classic question, did it work because of the tariffs or in spite of them?
A question that pops up a lot when you're looking at tariffs. And it's not just Great Britain. The U.S. also went through a phase of high tariffs during its own industrial rise in the 19th century.
Yeah, leading to those same debates about whether they actually helped or caused more problems.
Precisely. And then, of course, we can't forget about the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930.
Ah, yes. Smoot-Hawley, the poster child for how tariffs can go wrong.
That's often how it's portrayed, isn't it?
It is, and for good reason. It really highlights how tariffs can backfire.
So what happened?
Well, Smoot-Hawley was meant to help American farmers and industries during tough economic times. The idea was to make foreign goods more expensive so people would buy more American products,
Yeah, that makes sense in theory. But I guess it didn't really work out that way, did it?
Nope. Instead of helping, it kind of set off a chain reaction. Other countries retaliated with their own tariffs.
Oh, so it became a tit-for-tat tariff war.
Basically. And that really messed up international trade and actually made the Depression even worse.
Wow. So it sounds like history gives us a pretty mixed message about tariffs. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're a total disaster.
Exactly. It's not a simple yes or no answer.
So where does that leave us with these 2025 tariffs? Can we even predict what their impact will be?
It's tough to say for sure, but we can look at some potential consequences, like what might happen to the economy.
Okay, so let's talk economics. What are some of the potential downsides?
Well, for starters, consumers will probably end up paying more for everyday stuff.
So like groceries and clothes and gas, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, it's going to get passed down to us shoppers.
Okay, so let's get specific. What kinds of product are we talking about? What will people actually notice in their wallets?
Well, think about produce. Like avocados from Mexico, those prices could jump. And Canadian lumber, that's used in a lot of construction, so housing prices could go up.
And what about businesses? How will they be affected?
Businesses that rely on imported materials are going to feel the squeeze for sure. Those increased costs will either eat into their profits or they'll have to raise prices, which just feeds into inflation even more. And then there's retaliation. If Canada, Mexico, and China decide to slap tariffs on U.S. goods, well, things could escalate into a trade war pretty quickly.
So are we looking at another Smoot-Hawley situation?
It's definitely a risk. And even if we avoid a full-blown trade war, will these tariffs actually do what they're supposed to? Will they really curb illegal immigration and drug trafficking?
Yeah, the fact sheet seems to be tapping into people's fears about those issues. But will it translate into actual results?
Hard to say. It might resonate with some voters, especially those who are already worried about immigration and drugs. But if the economic consequences hit people's wallets too hard, it could backfire.
So people might start wondering, are these higher prices worth it? Especially if they don't see real progress on those other issues.
Right. And it's not just the economics. These tariffs could strain relationships with important trading partners, make it harder to work together on other global challenges.
So tariffs, they're a high-stakes game, aren't they? Potential benefits, but some serious risks too.
You got it. They can be a powerful tool. But using them without understanding the ripple effects, well, that can lead to some unintended consequences.
Hold on, though.
Yeah.
Are tariffs always a bad thing? I mean, aren't there situations where they make sense?
There are definitely arguments in favor of tariffs, like protecting infant industries.
Oh, yeah. That's where you use tariffs to help a new industry get started.
Right.
Shield it from foreign competition until it can stand on its own 2 feet.
Exactly. The idea is that temporary protection can help a domestic industry develop and eventually compete on a global scale.
And then there's the idea of using tariffs as leverage in trade negotiations.
Right.
Like, play by the rules, or we'll hit you with tariffs.
Yep, that's strategic tariffs. A way to pressure other countries to change their policies or open up their markets.
So it's not that tariffs are inherently good or evil. It's more about using them strategically and understanding the potential consequences.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's why it's so important to study the history of tariffs, both the successes and the failures.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the history of tariffs to the potential impact of these 2025 tariffs. But before we wrap things up, I want to leave you with a few final thoughts. So the big takeaway here, and I know we've talked about this, tariffs, they're complicated. Not always good, not always bad. It really depends.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about, like the whole economic and political scene, what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve? And will there be any surprises along the way?
And with these 2025 tariffs, there are so many questions. Will they actually work? Like, reduce illegal immigration and drug trafficking? Could they spark a trade war?
And will they end up hurting American consumers and businesses? It's a gamble.
A gamble, yeah, you said it. And not just some abstract policy debate. This could actually affect people's lives.
Yeah, sure.
So what can our listeners do? What should they be thinking about?
Well, first off, stay informed. Pay attention to what's happening. Read the news. And ask yourself, are these tariffs actually working? Are they causing more problems than they solve? Those big picture questions.
Exactly. And what about the long-term effects? How will this impact the U.S. economy and our relationships with other countries?
It's all connected.
It is. And here's another thought. Even if you agree with the goal, like reducing drug trafficking, for example, you still have to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, weigh the costs and benefits. It's rarely a simple fix, right?
Right. So keep those critical thinking caps on, everyone. Keep asking questions. That's what makes these deep dives so fascinating.
Absolutely.
And until next time, stay curious.